So I am thrilled to be joined by the very talented Dave May, who is a leading partner solutions architect for AWS. I see that you're with us, Dave. I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Lindsay. So even before COVID-19 forced content producers to work remotely, the trend towards remote collaboration was in progress. The lockdowns of 2020 only accelerated that process. As the market leader in cloud computing, AWS provides the most comprehensive set of cloud capabilities to quickly set up remote artist workstations, editorial workflows, collaboration platforms, and rendering. The AWS focus on the media and entertainment industry spans all levels: content supply chain and digital asset management, media distribution, machine learning and analytics, and of course, content creation and production. Industry leaders choose AWS for our broad range of services and features, our reputation for reliability and security, our low prices, and our focus on customer obsession. AWS is a global company, and Studio Q is supported in regions spanning the Americas, Asia, and Europe. A remote workforce using a shared Qumulo cluster and Teradici PCOIP workstations can have the cluster deployed in a nearby region to ensure low latency and high performance. Qumulo Studio Q is deployed as a quick start. AWS quick starts are an easy way for customers to deploy complex software and services on AWS infrastructure in an automated fashion. With quick starts, customers can deploy both production and proof of concept environments and start using them immediately. Like all the other quick starts, Studio Q is a simple push button deployment. Customers can simply click the launch link on the landing page, enter a few parameter values, and have their Qumulo environment ready to use in about 20 minutes. And with that, we'll head it over to Dak.
Thanks, Dave. So let's talk a little bit more about Qumulo and Studio Q. So Qumulo, our solution is completely unique in the market because we're the only scale out file data platform that allows you to deploy in the cloud and on-prem with the same user interface, the same APIs. It's the same software. We're platform agnostic, if you will. So whether you're deploying virtualized in the cloud or on-prem, our solutions can give you that shared file data platform for your editorial experience. Next slide. So what have we done with Studio Q? We've combined three market-leading solutions, or really four, if you will, including the AWS infrastructure. Adobe Premiere Pro, market-leading nonlinear edit suite, Teradici for the virtual desktop infrastructure, low latency and preferred by creatives, and then Qumulo for your shared file data platform. All of this is running on AWS infrastructure powered by Quick Start. This combination of these four elements is what we call Studio Q. Next. So with Studio Q, you get to free your editors to work from anywhere, work from home, work from the office, work from home and connect directly over public internet, or work from home and VPN back to the office and ride direct connect back to AWS. This enables their Premiere Pro workflows, as well as any other Creative Cloud applications that they may be using from Adobe, like After Effects, Photoshop, anything in that suite. Next. So the Quick Start is built on the 5 pillars of AWS well-architected framework. Qumulo is a well-architected framework certified solution and an advanced technology partner. So we've invested heavily to make sure that Studio Q and any cluster deployed on AWS is well-architected and enterprise class and enterprise ready. So you can assure that your solutions and your workflows will be enabled and you do not have to risk any data loss with the Qumulo file data platform. So it's those 4 components, well architected, and then empowered by the Quick Start to give you that quick, less than an hour from the time that you push the button to get up to 10 workstations running in the first pass.
All right. Thank you so much, Dak and Dave. I actually realized when I was doing our lovely introduction that I added guy to the end of that, like the ex-content developer I am. So apology for that, but wanted to clarify that. Definitely quick starts. But yes, thank you again both for being here. Definitely excited to discuss more about Studio Q. So the first question I have for both of you is what do you say is game changing about Studio Q at the basic level? Whichever of you would like to start, we can start with Dave if you would like.
Sure, I'll start and then Dak can jump in. Um, so with traditional remote streaming, with terminal services, remote desktop, et cetera, you can't really stream high quality video. So historically, content creators have had to work in the same physical space in order to be physically at a workstation where they could stream content from wherever the shared storage is. With the Teradicci PCOIP model, we can now do that. So people in disparate locations streaming a remote PC that's actually residing on AWS infrastructure can now stream 5K video. So Studio Q allows people to quickly spin up an environment where people, even in different continents, even can collaborate on the same media projects.
Yeah,
Dak, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the genesis from Cumulo's perspective for Studio Q was time to experience for customers. How could we accelerate people being able to experience remote editorial? We saw a lot of customers that had the desire, but they saw a lot of roadblocks in their way. The devil's in the details, as they say. So getting a workstation set up in the cloud, they didn't want to have to deal with a lot of the lower level technical complexities. And so that's why we put together Studio Q, was to give people a very rapid way to get a completely remote editorial experience using the Adobe Suite.
Yeah, I definitely love that. I always think about just in general, right? The hardest part is always just like getting up, getting started. So if that process is seamless and easy, it's so much easier to keep going, right? So I love that, the simplicity of it all. It's amazing. All right. So the question I have next is going to go to Dak here. Why do Emini companies need remote studio options?
Well, be it pre or post pandemic, I think that we've all learned a lot over the last 15, 18 months about what is possible. And through that, what we see from customers is they're looking to they want to give their employees freedom. A lot of employees are wanting to split more time between the home and office environments. But we also see companies looking to expand their talent pool and look for talent outside of where they may traditionally operate, where their corporate headquarters are located. And so they need remote editorial environments to be able to gain access to talent that they can afford for a given project, as an example, or just grow their business. So it's really about finding the best talent and marrying it up to their creative projects, and breaking those geographical boundaries, as well as allowing them to shift from a capex intensive model to something that's much more opex centric.
Yeah. Dave, do you have anything to add to that or any thoughts?
To elaborate on the CapEx versus OpEx part, with AWS infrastructure, you only pay for what you use. So if somebody just wants to treat this as an art of the possible exercise, as to deploy a proof of concept to demonstrate the ability to quickly deliver this remote editorial environment, it can be deployed very quickly, demonstrated, and then decommissioned just as quickly, so that the person who performed the proof of concept isn't incurring high costs during the process.
Excellent. So kind of on that similar note, Dave, this one's going to go to you. Why did Cumulo choose to build this as an AWS quick start? Like, what do you think were the main benefits? I mean, we've kind of highlighted on this, but would love for you to elaborate that.
Well, I think there's two parts to that question, really. It's A, why choose AWS to begin with? And B, why choose Quick Start in particular? So AWS has been focusing on media and entertainment customers and media and entertainment partners specifically. You can actually go to aws.amazon.com/media, and you can view customer stories from Netflix, Fox, Next Gen Stats from the NFL, the Peacock Network, and a bunch of other large successful companies that have been successfully deploying on AWS for some time now. So beyond that, why choose a quick start in particular? As Dak said, quick starts allow a very quick deployment time for customers and a very seamless customer experience. So rather than customers having to place assets in their account in order, manually deploy marketplace products and then manually configure their workstations, they can simply fill out a couple fields, hit go, and within an hour, have a fully functioning remote editorial environment available.
Thank you. Dak, do you have anything to add to that? Maybe the Peacock Network or anything? I'm like, that was amazing, by the way. Great reference point.
Yeah, I'll stay out of customer references, I guess, on this call, but certainly working with AWS has been just an amazing experience for us in this process. Their platform, their infrastructure, and the team that supports it is definitely first class all the way. So for us, it's about delivering a quality product, and we're very obsessed with customer experience. And we were just looking to enable customers to have an experience on AWS with remote editorial that would be similar to what they would have if they were just turning up a Cumulo cluster. And I think that's what we've delivered.
Excellent. And Dak, I have one more kind of related to the Emini shop. How do enterprise creative teams differ from Emini shops in their infrastructure needs, just kind of in general in terms of this?
Yeah, well, that's a broad question. Certainly, full-blown media and entertainment companies, their content is literally their path to monetization. So they have a lot more money to invest in their creative environment, whereas corporate editorial is a pretty broad spectrum. You have some high dollar productions, and then you also have just more seemingly rudimentary stuff, but equally important, like internal training videos and perhaps internal marketing promotional videos. So there's a lot going on in corporate editorial, and certainly those teams and those IT teams are looking for quick ways to enable their workforce as they look at this ever-shifting market of remote labor.
Excellent, thank you. And Dave, kind of speaking about the money aspect, my question for you is, do you think Studio Q is just a good fit for those cost-conscious customers out there?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, with AWS, you're only paying for for what you're using. So again, for proof of concept, it's a very quick, very inexpensive deployment. Studio Q also offers flexibility. So when selecting the amount of storage that you're going to deploy in your Cumulo cluster, it can be a relatively small amount or a relatively large amount, depending on the workload that you're expecting to use. You can also deploy however many workstations you want. So you can deploy with a single workstation, again, for maybe a proof of concept, or you can deploy with multiple workstations. And then once you've deployed your Studio Q environment, if your team grows, you can add additional workstations. If your team shrinks, you can decommission workstations. So there's no fixed cost that you have to pay up front for potentially unutilized workstations or unutilized storage.
Such a benefit right there. Dak, do you have anything to add on that?
I think that's a great point. On the cost front, I would add that for qualified proof of concepts, we do have the ability to give credits. AWS is supporting that, as well as $0 private offers from Cumulo. So that's for one workstation for 30 days. So the workstation, Teradici, and and Cumulo.
Love it.
And another advantage to the Quick Start program at AWS is that Quick Starts themselves don't have any costs associated with them. The Quick Start assets are open source. The Quick Start deployment process itself doesn't incur any cost to the customer.
So we're really making it easy then. That's all I'm hearing.
Yes.
Excellent.
All about
All
the
right.
easy button.
I know we need that one on the webinar. Just click it. Excellent. So let's see here. So I'm going to kind of shoot this to both you. I'll start with Dak. How do you feel about, like, is this a place for customers who aren't using the cloud at all, or do they at least need a little bit of familiarity? Or, I mean, we keep talking about this simple, easy button, but what about the cloud experience in general? Do you have to know, like, before we get started there? Or?
So I would say that if you've never used AWS before, and you're willing to actually read the install guide that Dave and I wrote, if you were willing to invest probably half a day, and I'm just being candid, I think in half a day, you could follow that guide, not knowing the first thing about AWS, and you could get to the point where you would be comfortable filling in the template parameters and pushing launch, and you would have your studio up and running in, you know, less than an hour after you push that button. So I think if you're willing to make a minimal investment in time, it's pretty easy to get going. There's nothing in here that's expecting you to have any extensive experience in AWS. But you know, there are some fundamentals. You need to understand what an S3 bucket is and what an EC2 key pair is. Some of these very basic things, but there's a lot of good training out there on that. And so I think for even the completely uninitiated, you can get going quickly.
Excellent. Dave, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I completely agree. To Dak's point, this Quick Start, along with every other Quick Start, includes a pretty comprehensive deployment guide that's accessible from the landing page. And it's written for a non-technical audience in mind. So somebody who has no experience whatsoever with AWS could follow that guide, could follow some of the links in the guide to, as Dak said, S3, EC2 key pairs, et cetera, familiarize themselves with the basic fundamental concepts, and then deploy the Studio Q Quick Start.
Excellent. Yeah. And honest plug, I have definitely taken a look. Very straightforward in terms of the guide that was created. And yeah, it's a good solid source of documentation right there. So Dak, way to go on the plug there, because I couldn't agree more. So love it. All right. So before we end the live discussion portion and kind of move on to the demo, I wanted to just make sure if there was anything else that either of you wanted to add before we continue forward. Just wanted to give you the opportunity. If not, we can definitely move on to my favorite part always, which is to see this in action. But yes, I just wanted to give you guys the option before we do that.
No, I don't think I have anything else to add right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to move on to the demo.
Excellent. Always love to put you guys on the spot too. It's just way fun. So, all right. So like I mentioned, it is now time to see Studio Q in action with the demo, but really quick before we do that, I would want to remind everyone that we definitely want you to join in on the conversation. I see that we have a few questions that have already come in. Thank you for those individuals that have sent those our way. Keep them coming in, honestly, because we definitely want to make sure that we cover the info that you would like to know in the live Q&A session coming up shortly. So, okay, I don't want to make any of you wait any longer to see the power of Studio Q.
Let me just give a quick overview of what this demo is going to consist of, Lindsay.
Excellent. Yeah, Dak, Mike's yours.
So what we have here for you is a demo of the end-to-end customer experience deploying Studio Q. So you'll get to see the AWS Quick Start landing page for Studio Q, and then launching it, filling in the template, watching the automation infrastructure build out the stack and nested stacks for the Studio Q Quick Start. Then a quick review of that infrastructure, and then using the Teradici client to log into a workstation, seeing the Studio Q desktop, the links that are on it, a quick review of the Cumulo file data platform and our user interface, and then seeing Premiere Pro launched with just a couple of minutes of footage driving some traffic on the cluster. So with that, let's kick it off.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dak.
Here we are on the Studio Q landing page, and as you can see, we have a link to deployment guide, and then we get an overview of the reference architecture as well as the stuff that is built by it bulleted. I'm going to jump right into the deployment guide. Deployment guide gives you some more overview stuff, costs, licenses, the normal things. Let's talk a bit about the architecture. So Studio Q has two options. It can deploy the entire VPC and all the infrastructure inside of it, or it can deploy just the infrastructure in an existing VPC. Today, we'll deploy the entire VPC. So in the private subnet, so when I say VPC, that means the entire VPC, subnets, public, private, internet gateways, NAT gateway. In the private subnet, you see the Cumulo instances. These are M5 2x larges today, along with the EBS volumes that underpin those. A Active Directory domain controller is also spun up, and all the workstations and cluster are connected to it. That provisioner instance does secondary provisioning of the Cumulo, and then we have a metrics collector that's monitoring metrics on the Cumulo, sending those to CloudWatch. The health monitor monitors the EBS volumes, checks to see if there's any failures, and replaces those, sends a notification to SNS. And then up in the public subnet, we have the workstations, by default 1 up to 10 in the first pass, as we mentioned. And those all get an elastic IP, public static IP, so it's easy for people to get back to their workstation. So let's just scroll down here. I've already reviewed my quotas. I've got everything I need. I'm going to deploy in US West 2, Oregon. That's all the supported regions for the quick start. I've already accepted my license, but if you hadn't, there's directions here on how to do so from Marketplace. And then I'm going to click right into Deploy Studio Q in a new VPC. Okay, it automatically pops up, populates the URL. I'm going to select my region from the top right corner, Oregon, click Next. I'm going to give this a little bit more intuitive name something a bit more post-production oriented. I'll call it Post Team 1. And then got to pick an AZ. I'll go for US West 2B. Subnets look good by default, but I want to go with the 12 terabyte hybrid. I'm going to keep the default of M5 2x larges. I am sensitive to who uses my data from an encryption perspective, so I'm going to deploy my own encryption key. You see me paste that in from KMS. Leave the cluster name. The security group needs to match the VPC of the subnet, and you can see that by default those two match. I'll keep that share name Adobe Projects. Skip the recovery topic because I haven't set up SNS notifications. And now I'm going to enter the password for my sidecar. Sidecar is deploying those lambdas. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I'm going to pick G4DN 4x larges, and I'm going to do 4 of those. I bumped my instance size up in case I want to do a bit more After Effects work. You can choose to enhance your security group for all these instances with the source IP that your public connection is coming from, but I'm going to just leave that wide open for now. Next, set up the domain controller. This primarily is just entering a bunch of passwords, so we need a Active Directory service admin password. And by the way, all these passwords are stored in Secrets Manager, so if you fat finger one or just forget what you put in, you can always go just grab them from Secrets Manager. Need a safe mode password. And none of these are auto-populated. You can see none of them echo back. They are all quite securely treated per AWS policy. This is the important one, the Active Directory default account password. So you pick that, and that is what your users will use in their first login. I'm going to keep the domain name of studioq.local. I'm going to keep the A record name of Cumulo. It gives me a UNC path of cumulo.studioq.local. I don't need to change anything about the bucket. That was all populated by the quick start. And so let's just review our stack and click next. I think I entered everything right, so I'm going to click both these acknowledgements and create stack. Okay, so now the stack is building, and you can see that the first thing it does is go create the VPC. Okay, we've fast forwarded in time, the stack is built. Let's take a look at what it built and tell you a bit more about that. You see that VPC stack and then a Studio Q stack. Those are two nested stacks under the top level YAML file. Let's push into the Studio Q stack because it's got a bunch of nested stacks underneath it. The first one is a secret stack. This is storing all those passwords that we typed in the template. Pretty helpful if you need to refer to it. Then the security stack's creating some security groups for subsequent use by the infrastructure. And then next is the IAM stack. IAM stack is creating an IAM profile for the cluster so that it can manage EC2 secondary IPs as floating IPs in Cumulo language for IP failover. Next is the Q stack. That's the Cumulo stack for all of the instances in the cluster, plus the underpinning EBS volumes. Placement group creation, EBS volume tagging, a bunch of stuff goes on in the Q stack. And then next is the DC stack. I think my mouse is going to move there momentarily. That's the domain controller. So that's spinning up the Active Directory server as well as DNS for the VPC. And then next after that is the sidecar stack. That's spinning up those two Lambda functions we mentioned in the reference architecture for metrics and disk recovery. And then the provisioning stack. This is a small instance that is spun up that does the secondary provisioning of the Cumulo cluster. So that's pounding in sidecar username, password, as well as custom RBAC role, EBS volume tagging, all of that secondary stuff that needs to be done on the cluster. And then the CloudWatch stack. This is creating two resource groups so that users can get quick, easy, filtered views of their cluster EC2 infrastructure and EBS volumes in CloudWatch. Finally, we hit the Workstation stack. Was what we really, all came here for. So the first workstation is turned up, and then the subsequent workstations are turned up in parallel. So you can see those last three are kicked off in parallel. So whether you do one workstation, well, I should say whether you do 2 or 10, it's about the same time to turn up the stack. So let's just go ahead and take a look at our EC2 infrastructure quickly, just to make sure that we've got what we expect. There's our domain controller, an M5 large. The provisioning node, which was spun up, did its job and automatically shuts down. That's all in the directions to monitor. There's your 4 nodes for the cluster, and then the 4 workstations below that, G4DN 4X larges. Let's pop back here to the top level stack from CloudWatch and look at the outputs. You can see that we have a bunch of links here. So if you need to get to the knowledge base, if you want to know the private IP address, trying to access the cluster from a machine in your VPC, there's the temporary password for the cluster. If you haven't installed the PCOIP client on your machine, there's a link there that'll let you do that. I'm going to jump right into that first workstation we spun up. Kick off the PCOIP client, which I've already installed. Click new connection, drop the IP address in, hit next. Self-signed URL. Okay, so here is the username and the password that I entered. all right from the template. Authentication with PCO-IP. This session ironically took longer to authenticate than normal. So here we are at the landing screen, if you will, on a workstation. Automatically pop up the sign in to Adobe. You see the link in the top left. That's a link to the share, and then there's a link to the Cumulo UI. A bunch of other links there as well. I'm just going to go ahead and download Creative Cloud and install it. And while that's taking place, I'm going to take a look at the cluster and just verify I pasted in that password that you saw in the CloudFormation outputs. You can see we got 12.6 terabyte usable. And if we click more details, there's the 4 instances that we spun up. If we click into one of those, we'll see our EBS volumes, a mix of SSD because it's a hybrid cluster, and the spinning disk behind that is ST1 volumes, 10 by 500 gigabyte. Look at the network configuration. You see a persistent IP per node plus 3 floating IPs. That's all been set up. And here are our local users and groups. There's a sidecar user that was created, as well as a Studio Q local user just for convenience. Role management, there's our sidecar user, custom RBAC role. And then let's just make sure it's joined to the Active Directory domain. Indeed it is, joined to the Studio Q domain. Okay, we do have a little bit of content on here because I placed content on this cluster. If we go look at our Capacity Explorer, we can see it's all sitting in that Adobe Projects SMB share. If we click into that, you see it's dominated by media for a Adobe project that I've placed on this cluster. Those that are familiar with Cumulo, probably somewhat familiar with Capacity Explorer, you can hover on these things for information about all the files, types, sizes. So we'll jump back to basically shrink this screen over to the left and just blow up the section of the dashboard that shows our read, write, throughput, and latency. And we'll kick off Adobe Premiere Pro. This will show you a little bit of activity on the cluster. It's not going to push the cluster, but gives you a sense for the function. Notice the cache files are all being cached on the Cumulo. I've disabled local caching on the workstation. Not a recommended Adobe practice, but makes the demo better. So here's a video that Adobe put together for Cumulo. You can see it's got a quite complicated audio track with a bunch of effects, a bunch of cuts on the video. So it's a decent timeline for this little minute 10 video. Let's just roll this. Dreamers. The make-believers holding this from the clouds. When dreamers stargaze to the sky face back, 1 billion eyes on a call to act. Show them. I've calculated control. We have one reflection made. And through universe and more magic, chase the clouds and snatch the invisible. Make them believe in the truth. Because we are here to live our breath. We are here to leave our breath, our souls and our stories. To live our life, to live our legend, to be told. Leave your footprint among the stars for the rest of us to follow. Okay, so that's some HD content, all long MP4 stuff. Doesn't push cluster hard. You can see that if I scrubbed the timeline, I'm getting more up in that 27 megabyte, still not pushing the cluster hard, but bumped it up from the 14 peak you saw before. Let's roll it at 2x and 4x. 2, 4. So you can see there that that got us up around 34 meg, I believe it was. And again, if you're watching the video, because that's more interesting than the graphs on the left, you might have missed that. But you can see it here. If you look over to the left, you'll see the throughput up there around 34. So again, not pushing the cluster hard, but gives you an idea of the fact that the environment is all up and running, workstation fully functional with Premiere Pro. So that's a wrap on the demo.
Dak, I always love your demos because you're just so relatable. Like it's so good. I'm just like, and my mouse moved. And oh, that was awesome. Though so cool. I do have to ask, were you doing the voiceover for the video too that you were editing? Because that was pretty.
No, I wasn't doing that. And I apologize to all the attendees for the fact that the audio doesn't sound that great recorded through my my laptop speakers, but hey, it's better than nothing. We're just looking to give you you know, a quick real-time example. So
Well, I loved it. I think you did a great job, and I am very excited with all that being said to move on to the Q&A, because I know we have some great questions that have come in, and there's still time for those of you that are still here. So keep them coming. So I'm going to grab the first question from the Q&A. This was submitted. Dave, you were right on top of it. You already posted an answer. I love it. But just in case our attendees didn't see that, I wanted to relay the question of, are all of the licenses included in the AWS Ami if this is delivered as an Ami?
Yeah, thank you. So both the Teradici workstation and the Qumulo nodes are delivered via marketplace Amis. So prior to launch, and this is all part of the deployment guide, the customer or you will need to go to the AWS marketplace, find both the Qumulo marketplace entry and the Teradici marketplace entry, and subscribe to both. When the quick start is then deployed, all of those Amis have the licenses included in your build based on the marketplace agreement.
Excellent. And as a follow-up to that, we also had how many instances are required to run the Qumulo cluster, and is a cluster required, Dave?
All right, so as the quick start is currently written, there are 4 nodes that are deployed using either a smaller or a larger storage size, depending on what the customer selects. However, quick starts are all open source. I pasted a link to the GitHub repository that includes all of the CloudFormation templates. So if you wanted to customize any of this to fit your own unique use case, you could certainly clone that GitHub repository into your own account, make whatever changes you want to make, and then deploy via your own S3 bucket.
Oh, I love that. And thank you for supplying the link for everyone joining us today. That's great. So, okay. So we are going to move the next one to Dak. We had a great question in the chat here. Dak, I don't know if you saw this, but it looks like it says from Matthew, your solution sounds similar to EditShare's EFSV solution, which also does Premiere and A&E. It utilizes Teradici like you two. 2 questions. How are you different? Is it tech, cost, spin up time even easier? And 2, while you and them utilize Premiere with EditShare, you would see volumes of your SAN mounted locally on-prem, on-prem from your thin client. So in theory, something that doesn't require real-time video playback, i.e. Nuke, Cinema 4D, you could use their service as well to work on non-Premiere AE projects and see access media. Can Qumulo do the same? Ooh, that was lots of words. I love it. Thank you so much, Matthew. All right, Dak, you got that?
Yep. So yes, thanks for the question, Matthew. Indeed familiar with EditShare. So EditShare delivers a asset management platform combined with their storage solution that underpins it. It's a more traditional storage solution as opposed to Qumulo, which is a scale out enterprise class file data platform. we are not packaging an asset management solution in Studio Q. Rather, we took the approach that because there are many flavors of asset management out there and customers may have different preferences, we would let them bring their asset management platform into the mix. So and that really leads me to answer your next question, which is around using other tools in your workflow. The thing to keep in mind about Studio Q is that we've given you a quick start, a way to get it up and running rapidly, but we haven't locked you in to just one application. At the end of the day, these are Windows 2019 servers that we've turned all the bells and pushed all the, or turned all the dials and turned off the right warnings and enabled audio and all of these things you have to do to get a Windows server in line, so to speak, for a Emini workflow. But you can install, it's your infrastructure. You can install any application that you want on there. And at least to the best of my ability thus far, we've made sure that, we attach enough hard drive and stuff so you can install After Effects. If you want to install other solutions from other providers, there's nothing that prevents you from doing that. Likewise with the Active Directory server, you can put your own group policies on that. You have all the admin rights. The passwords for admin were typed in the template. So you can really take the environment that we help you get started quickly, and then you can customize from there. And literally this week I'm working with SIs that are looking to do exactly that. They will take that basic package and then make it their own, so to speak, right?
Excellent.
And like Dave says, it's all open source. So, we're looking to enable you and rapidly get you up and running. And then with a best of breed market leading set of underlying components.
Great. Thanks so much, Dak. And the next question we have is what is the ideal speed to avoid lag time when it comes to the workflow? And so Dave, Dak, if either of you want to answer that.
So one of the advantages to deploying on AWS via this quick starter, otherwise, is that the workstations and the cluster actually reside in the same region, in the same availability zone within AWS. So there's very low latency between the workstation itself and the cluster. As far as speed to the workstation to avoid lag, I'm not actually sure what the minimum is in order to ensure you can stream. Dak, do you have any insight into that?
It's certainly variable. I can say that it is shockingly, having used a lot of remote desktop products in my career. When I spun up Sydney as an example, I turned up Studio Q in Sydney and fired up Teradici, and I thought, well, this will be a less than optimal experience. And my takeaway from that was, wow, for standard desktop work, you wouldn't know that it was running in Sydney, and I was sitting in Washington State. Certainly for high-end editorial where you want frame accuracy and AV sync, you wouldn't want that latency. You'd want to leverage the power of AWS's global reach and make sure that you deployed somewhere closer to your user. Really, more than focusing on bandwidth, we focus on just that round trip time. You'd like to keep that in that sub 100 millisecond, ideally in that 60 millisecond range.
And thank you both for the details on that. And it looks like we just had another question come in. It says, when additional workstations are added and the cluster utilization peaks, does the cluster scale dynamically, or is that done manually as ongoing maintenance?
Yeah, we're not using an auto scaling group to dynamically scale the cluster. And, that's a purposeful decision on Cumulo's part. Um, really around the notion that we want to make sure that when you decide to grow your cluster, you're making that choice, uh, so that you know all you that you're involved in all the decisions that are made as far as you may choose to change your instance type as you increase capacity because you want more performance. So uh, certainly we take advantage of automation where it makes sense, but in the case of growing your overall capacity, we leave that to you to decide when you would like to do that. But we can automate that simply. So.
Excellent. Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
No, just like Dak said, it's not currently deployed in an auto scaling group. It's something that could be done manually. Again, being open source, you could always update that template to deploy an auto scaling group, but by default, this is just meant to deploy the starting place, and you would need to scale manually.
Excellent. And since we're kind of touching on this, just for a very clear answer, another question we had was, my team has 5 people right now, but will likely grow to 15 in the next year. Will I be able to add additional workstations and still have them collaborate with my initial 5?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can deploy up to 10 in the template that you saw us kick off. Let's say in this example that you deployed 5 workstations initially, and then some period of time later you want to deploy additional workstations. There's also a permalink in the install guide to add a workstation. And you click that link and just copy the stack name in from your original stack, and it picks up all the parameters that you entered originally. Allows you to change the number of that workstation, and if you want to change the instance type, and then spins up an additional workstation. So you would just kick that off for your additional workstations, and you can add them without having to like completely destroy your studio and spin it back up.
We really need an easy button every time you say that, Dak or Dave. I just want to be like, bing, like, love it. Dave, this one's going to go to you here. It says, I'm not part of an Emini company, but my company produces its own videos for marketing and training. Can we still use Studio Q?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a quick start. Quick starts are open source, are available for anybody to use. Any customer who wants to, regardless of industry. The only prerequisite is that you have an AWS account. So yes, absolutely.
And on that note, we did have a question come in as well, where it says, do I have to use AWS workstations with Qumulo Studio Q?
So this quick start was designed with the Teradici streaming workstations in mind. The workstations that are deployed as part of the quick start are optimized, as Dak said. The Windows settings are tweaked in such a way as to be optimal for a media editing environment. So with this quick start, that's the goal. That being said, once you've deployed the quick start, you will have a Cumulo cluster running in your AWS account, and you can interact with that Cumulo cluster however you want.
Excellent. And Dak, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have customers that are very sophisticated users of AWS, and they may have their own workstations or creative environment set up. And if you fall in that category and you look at Studio Q and you're like, hey, I've already done all this work and I've customized it for my environment, and you're looking for a file data platform that gives you the scale out experience, perhaps complements your on-prem solution. We certainly have CloudFormation templates to.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Talk about going out with a bang. I think we just lost Dak. Oh no. All right. Well, I will make sure that Dak is okay, but ironically enough, I think he exited. He wanted an early exit, a very dramatic one. No, we were just going to wrap up, but I wanted to say thank you to him, but I will speak on behalf of all of us when I see him at the office and happily say thank you for his time today. So Dave, Thank you so much. All the information you provided, just the conversation in general, the discussion, it was fantastic.
No, thank you for moderating.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, my pleasure. I always have fun on these events. And yes, it's always great to see the questions coming in and all the attendees. And yeah, sincerely, thank you for taking the time to be here with us and talk all things AWS with Cumulo. So I love it. All right, so for everyone that joined us today, thanks again for coming. And honestly, for those of you that sent in questions, really appreciate you joining the conversation. We literally could not have done the Q&A session without you. So thanks again. And on behalf of everyone here at Cumulo, we really hope you enjoyed the webinar today. We always love to hear from you. So if you do have any questions, you can reach out to your local Cumulo team. And if you don't know who that is, no worries. You can just send us a quick email at info@cumulo.com and we'll get you squared away. So again, this is Lindsay Winthrop signing off from Seattle. Thank you again for joining and be well.